L, it is an action item and is a grant request recommended for approval by the Colorado, Gunnison, Southwest, and the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtables. The applicant and fiscal agent is the Colorado River Water Conservation District for the project titled Basin Roundtable Technical Study on Colorado River Risk Response Options. And if it pleases the chair, I'd like to turn over the rest of the presentation to Director Eklund.
Director Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item has received quite a bit of conversation and discussion, appropriately so. It's a statewide issue of importance. And so we have, in light of the conversation yesterday that this board had and other conversation, we have changed the staff recommendation a little bit, and I'll read that revised recommendation here into the record. Staff recommendation. Staff recommends approval of up to $10,000 from each of the basin's accounts to help fund the project titled Basin Roundtable Technical Study on Colorado River Risk Response Options, with the addition of the following provision in the project statement of work. Quote, this work product is solely that of the applicants, and the applicants do not claim that it represents the views or interests of the state of Colorado. End quote. So with that revised staff recommendation, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back to you, and I'm sure there are people, members of the board, that would like to comment on this. And but before they do, I want to thank the board and the community and the applicant for their hard work in getting to a recommendation from the staff that is acceptable and comports with the importance of this issue to the entire state. So with that, I'll yield back to you.
Question, Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Eklund. I have to also give high compliments to Director Eklund and his staff, specifically Carly Brown and Becky Mitchell, for the hard work they did to find consensus on this item. There was, as Director Eklund said, a lot of conversation. All of us learned quite a bit during that conversation, and I appreciate the time that everyone involved spent talking about it and working toward a solution that I think we've arrived at now. And that's what I'd like to say for the time being.
Very good. Do our directors on the phone have anything to offer at this time? Comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is Alan.
Yes, Director Hamill.
I have a frog in my throat. I just wanted to speak in support of this motion to move it forward. I hope we can get a unanimous vote. I would like, and doing what I'm about to do, I'll leave people out, but just following this process closely over the last few months, particularly the last 2 weeks, I'd like to compliment, and I think of Director George's comments last night. I know how bad he might be busy here today. But thank the applicant, the 4 Western Slope Roundtables, 3 Eastern Slope Roundtables, their leadership teams and technical teams that had a lot of discussion, a lot of effort went into it. I want to thank my fellow board members who worked on this item, and particularly Director McLeod. I'd also like to recognize Director Eklund, Director Stoll, and 2 of our section chiefs, Carly Brown and Becky Mitchell, for all the hard work that went into where we're at today. And again, just want to speak in support of this motion as we move forward this amended motion.
Thank you, Director Hamill. Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are no more comments or questions from the board, I would like to move approval of the staff recommendation.
It's been moved by Director McLeod, second by Director Hamill, to approve staff recommendation, agenda item 24I. Further discussion. Director Wells.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about why we got into an issue, because particularly since several of the proponents are here. So, I don't know enough about modeling to know when it's good or when it's bad. I do know that modeling doesn't provide decision-making. Modeling is trying to look at a whole bunch of numbers and variables and play them off against each other and see how it looks. And somehow this particular grant proposal didn't come across quite that way. It may be there were some issues with phase one and how phase one was described or how phase one was used. And from my perspective, and if the proponents disagree with anything I say, any characterization I make, please let me know, that this modeling exercise is so that the West Slope roundtables will have more information for themselves in their own determinations of what they think a reasonable increment of West Slope development would be that we should try to protect in an effort to avoid curtailment. At first, I didn't understand how this was part of Principle 4, which started with the word collaborative, but I understand that that's not it. This particular study isn't necessarily, nor need it be, collaborative. Instead, for West Slope roundtables to determine what a reasonable increment of West Slope development to be protected along with existing uses and growth into East Slope systems and that sort of thing. What are some trade-offs? What are some risks? How can you play around with the information and figure out what makes sense? In that regard, that's something that West Slope roundtables should be able to do for themselves. I liken it a little bit to Denver Water's PACSIM model. We developed it for ourselves. It's proprietary. We use it to help us make decisions. We don't let it go into court because that's not what it's for. We don't use it outright in negotiations because that's not what it's for. We're trying to figure out if we do this or we do that or somebody else does this water right or whatever, what does it look like? What does it do to us? And so I'm hoping that this will be that sort of study. We started out with East Slope saying, well, we want to be part of the management team and the state should be part of the management team and the state should control it. But that's based on what the scope might be. That's based on how the modeling might be used. And if the modeling is used to sort of externally, if you will, externally as a weapon in negotiations, as a proof of something to the other states in the Colorado Basin, then it's a problem. So I'm hoping that it can be brought back to maybe where it started. I think some of the language in the original proposal, don't use the word curtailment in any document that's in writing or even verbally. So that if it's that kind of thing that I just described, then it'll be fine. And the East Slope won't have to be worried and they won't have to, try to tear it down. So if we can do that, then hopefully maybe the next time we can avoid all this angst. But the disclaimer, as we call it, that James just read in the recommendation is to say, this isn't the state's work. This isn't the state's position on anything. And it is really belongs to the West Slope roundtables to help them make some decisions. But I would urge that rather than having a technical advisory committee, which people feel like their comments aren't honored or they don't agree with the outcome, and then their names are on the technical advisory committee and it looks like they agree and they don't agree. That happens all the time with technical advisory committees, is that there really be some conversations as you guys go along with your studies. Conversations, what do you think about this? How does this seem out of line to you people who model for a living? Some of that kind of stuff. And if it's open, then the East Slope won't have to be put in the position of belittling whatever the outcome is. They won't have to worry about a press release being issued. And I just think we can manage our way through this by keeping what's modeled and how it's used in the narrow confines of helping the West Slope Roundtables be more informed for their own purposes. And I think if we could keep it there, maybe the next time we won't have anything like this, which would be great as far as I'm concerned. So thank you. That's my speech. If I have misspoken, please let me know. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wells.
Yeah, Eric Kuhn, Colorado River District for the record, and Patty Wells, I appreciate that, and I would have said almost the same thing. So well spoken. Models are used to help people make decisions by looking at changing what happens if we change this parameter. Does another parameter change in an insignificant way, or does it change in a more significant way? You know, it helps us make decisions. It doesn't make decisions for us. They don't predict the future, and they're all wrong. But if we understand the limitations, they're very helpful in making good decisions. So I appreciate your comments, and I agree with that.
Further questions? The chair needs to correct a mistake. I stated it's agenda item 24I. It is actually agenda item 24L. We are still on the same page. There are no further questions. I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes agenda item 24. Thank you for your time.
All right, we are moving to agenda item 26. House Bill 15-1178, Emergency Dewatering Grant Fund Update with Eric.
Good afternoon, Chairman Waterman. Wow, Wattenberg, members of the board. I need caffeine. Good night. For the record, my name is Eric Sky. I'm in the Interstate Federal and Water Information section. I'm going to be presenting agenda item 26, 25, whatever it actually ended up being after all the switching. It's the House Bill 15-1178 Emergency Dewatering Grant Fund Update. If you recall, you guys approved the criterion guidelines document for that back in July of 2015. So I kind of wanted to give you all an update of where that money's been going. We got $580,000 in that program, what we've been doing, and what the future holds for the program. So to start off, we've had 4 projects go before the board since that criterion guidelines was approved, one of which was withdrawn. 3 have been awarded funds, and we do have $171,463.50 left in that account, which I'll kind of talk a little bit later about what we're going to do in the future. I wanted to briefly mention that project that was withdrawn. So in July of 2015, we had the town of Gilcrest come before us with a school well dewatering project. It was a well located on the north side of town, and we approved it contingent on us getting all the permissions in place. And we ended up not being able to get all those permissions. It was kind of verbally agreed that it would happen, but it didn't end up happening. But the nice thing about that is it actually inspired our first successful project with this. So the dewatering improvement study for the town of Gilcrest was sort of the realization that they needed a permanent solution that didn't rely on ditch systems and people outside of Gilcrest in order to get this water conveyed to the South Platte River. It really would provide them a little bit of security, and we needed to figure out how we could do that. So these are the solutions that were derived. JVA and Bishop Brogdon Engineering Group were hired by the town of Gilcrest. So if you look over on this left side here, what they came up with was a 3 dewatering well solution, as well as a new pumping station over here in their stormwater retention pond. Only one of the wells that you see on that map is actually would be a new well. The other 2, this GMP and the M&E wells, already exist. So that's a huge plus. These lines that you see over here are the 3 conveyance alignments that JVA and Bishop Brogdon looked at in order to get that water back out to the South Platte River. I would like to say that this northern alignment here was sort of recommended in the report as the most preferred alternative, and that's just because it allows for more partnership potential, but there is a large cost associated with these alternatives, and I'll let Trudy Peterson behind me, the town administrator for the town of Gilchrist, sort of speak on that a little later. I would also like to mention that Central Colorado Water Conservancy District has come up with an alternative of their own. They're still going before their board to see if it would be feasible and to see if it would actually be beneficial to everybody, but they are looking into other ways to make this work and to help the town of Gilchrist with their dewatering as well. So what would those wells do for the town? Well, according to the modeling that Bishop Brogdon did, after just 1 year of this optimized pumping, you can see here in the actual town of Gilchrist, we'd be looking at 20 to 25 feet below ground surface would be the new water table elevation. Right now, it's closer to 10 to 5 to half a foot, and I'll have a map that shows that a little bit later. But after 5 years of pumping under this optimized scenario that they came up with, you can see that a lot of the area in the town of Gilchrist actually goes to this greater than 25 foot below surface elevation, which is considered very ideal. So let's talk about next the dewatering pilot project study for, wow, not study, dewatering pilot project near the town of Gilchrist. So this was inspired through a lot of conversations with the Groundwater Technical Committee. We came up with this 7-section area here to try and incentivize farmers to pump more groundwater and divert less surface water, to try and sort of do an alternative management strategy and see if we could lower the water table that way. These 7 sections were selected because of just how high that water table is in these areas. We're looking at anywhere from 10 to 15 feet below the ground surface to right at the ground surface in some areas. That's what this gray is here. And so through this project, we ended up getting 6 participants that were incentivized to pump more, and we did that through 2 options. So we had option A, which gave the farmers $60 per acre foot to pump beyond their 2013-2015 pumping average. We had a secondary option that would provide og water to the participants so that they could pump up to their central contractual amount. So this is beyond the quota that Central projected for that year, and it would be up to their full contractual amount, and we provided the augmentation water for that. This augmentation water was actually leased through the city of Aurora, and it was delivered down to Reach B, and as you can imagine, we did suffer a lot of transit loss issues with that. So 2 of the participants decided to go for that option A, which is that $60 per acre foot. And we had 4 participants that went for the option B, which was to pump up to their contractual amount with Central. Year 1 of this pilot project actually ended on March 1st. That's when Central's water year resets. And so just a little bit of the numbers for you guys, the total increased pumping per acre foot, this is our pilot project water, and then a lot of these participants also did a bit of quota trading within Central's system itself in order to get themselves more pumping within these 7 sections. So the total increase was 664.81 acre feet, and that was from the augmentation water that we provided and their quota trading. Now, if we're just talking about the augmentation water that we provided, that's 534.29 acre feet. Is how much was increased from the 2013-2015 average to this pilot project year. The total increased consumptive use, because really that's how we're going to change the water budget, was 421.69 acre feet. And that, again, is pilot project combined with that quota trading. If we're just talking about the og water supplied through the pilot project, that's closer to around 337 acre feet. So this is put together by Willem Schroeder. This is a little graphic that Principia Mathematica put together for us. It's relative water change. So these values really aren't what the water level is at. I want to stress that. This point right here was the date that was determined to sort of normalize the data so we could figure out what the relative change has been. Farmers started pumping right around here in March of 2016. And so you can kind of see, as you would imagine, from June on during the irrigation season, the water tables did rise in all the monitoring wells that we had installed. But then here we had this November, December, January, February, things started to decrease significantly. And that was just from this July of 2016. Now, the other thing to note here is that back in June and July of 2015, water tables were generally 4 feet higher for these monitoring wells than they were in June, July of 2016 when we started to normalize that data there. So then the next project that I would like to talk to you guys about is the Pawnee Ridge dewatering system. This is a project that you all approved in September. This one is coming along quite nicely. It's still in progress. We haven't completed everything just yet, but this pipeline here, this yellow pipeline, it was trench installed, and this red here was bored. All of that was installed within a few weeks of you guys approving that grant, which is just fantastic. And in fact, they started their dewatering operations on November 12th. And we know qualitatively that the sump pumps in this subdivision here have actually started to decrease. How often they turn on, how much they pump. And so from a qualitative standpoint, that has been a success thus far. Currently, right now, they have finished installation of the head gate that they were going to rehabilitate through this project. They are waiting to finish up installation of telemetry and all that good stuff so that we can get real-time data collection. They've been working closely with Division 1 staff in order to make sure that they're in compliance with all of the dewatering regulations and administration that they need to be. So let's, oh yeah, got a little picture there. This is the St. John family and the Thim family. This is them celebrating the installation of that pipeline and actually getting those pumps turned on there. One can only hope. So what does the future hold for this program? Well, we do have that $170,000 left over after these few projects. And so $60,000 of that may be coming for you before you guys, maybe as soon as May, for the wastewater treatment plant dewatering well that I discussed earlier that would be new as per that JVA Bishop Brogdon recommendations. So that would go towards the installation of this permanent dewatering well. It would be tied into their current effluent line and conveyed out to the South Platte River via that. But that's coming down for this program here very soon. The next project that will be coming before you within, well, hopefully by the next board meeting, would be a dewatering pilot project year 2. So this next year, we want to put a real emphasis on data collection, and we really want to involve soil moisture probes. So last year, we also had one of the participants install moisture probes on his farm, and it turned out that that actually helped him significantly compared to our pumping allocations, because he was actually able to see what's happening on his farm, how to irrigate, and prevented him from over irrigating his farm. So we're looking into doing a cost share program for that via this year 2 of the pilot project. We're also in conversations right now with the city of Greeley. We're going to lease the og water from them, hopefully if they have the supply, and that'll eliminate that transit loss problem that we had by leasing via Aurora. Now, as I mentioned, we want to collect a lot more data, and that includes surface diversion data. Last year, we sort of just had a qualitative mark off if you diverted surface water, and we would assume that it would be a 1-for-1. You pumped this amount, you didn't divert this amount. But this year, we really want to see those numbers. And again, this is going to be a voluntary program, so we don't know what the participation is going to look like, but that's just what we're thinking for this so far. And then the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about is just how many people have been involved in all these different projects. I'm sure that I didn't cover everybody, but none of these projects would have been possible without the participation of everyone up here. And I'm sure that there's a bunch that I forgot, but it really comes down to the people involved that make these projects a success. And so with that, myself, Andy Moore, and Trudy Peterson are all available for any questions that you may have.
Questions for Eric? Trudy, would you like to address the board?
If you don't mind, thank you. I just wanted to say that between...
If you could maybe identify yourself.
Certainly, Trudy Peterson, Town of Gilchrist Administrator. I just wanted to say that the assistance that we've gotten from the technical committee and from the division and from this 1178 money has really given us resources that we wouldn't have otherwise to be able to figure out what to do with our situation. So I wanted to thank everyone for that. We still do have some large challenges ahead of us. The engineering study that we did showed us what we need to do. Now we need to figure out how to do it. And I think partnering with Central is going to help both Central and the town to start. We've already started talking a little bit about how we can take that information and maybe add to it and come up with some better, less expensive ways, because the way that was recommended is many millions of dollars. So, hopefully we can use that and come up with something. We will be coming before you soon, as Eric said, so that we can do phase 1, which is a dewatering well at our wastewater treatment plant. Our project there is nearly finished. So we hope to get further support from you in that regard. And if any of you have any questions.
Any questions? Well, thank you for being here
Thank you.
today. Very much appreciated. Director Young.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you especially to Andy. He's putting a lot of work into this, and John Stolp as well. They've helped us out a lot with the South Platte Basin Roundtable Technical Committee, and I know it's been a lot of hard work, so I just really appreciate it, because it's been an issue that's come up for some time, and hopefully we can get something resolved, because we don't like to see people hurting like that. And when things change a little bit, it sometimes can become difficult. So thanks for all your work.
All right, that looks like it concludes 26. Let's move to agenda item 27.
Thank
Correct?
You want to move up? He was wondering if we moved 30.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, let's go to agenda item 30.
All right, thank you, Michelle Garrison, CWCB staff, for agenda item 30, or whatever number we want to call it. So this is just a quick update on the Aquatic Nuisance Species Program. You all listened to a presentation at your January board meeting from CPW about this super important program that was losing its funding under Tier 2 severance tax. And we just wanted to come back with you with some updates, because there was still a lot of things unknown at that time. So I just received a quick update from CPW, and since that time, they continue to work on these long-term funding solutions, but we were focusing on their short-term funding crisis. And they're continuing to work with partners, including Denver Water, Colorado Springs Utilities, the Pueblo Board of Waterworks, the Dolores Water Conservancy District, the Forest Service, Reclamation, and some other folks, including the CWCB. To date, they've managed to get $650,000 committed from those partners, and they think they're going to get about $900,000 hopefully here soon. For the board's part of it, we have two things we're trying to do to help out. The first is you'll see a $100,000 request later today from our own severance tax for 2017, 2018 to put towards this short-term funding until they can get a new long-term funding source. And secondly, we went back through some of our old Species Conservation Trust Fund bills and some of the money that we had available to see if any of that could be put towards this program. And we believe we have found some. So the 2015 Species Conservation Trust Fund request had $1 million appropriated for non-native species control. And at the time that we asked for it, the wording was vague because we were planning to cover a lot of different projects, mostly for the recovery program. This included some work CPW wanted to do in the Yampa at the Walton Creek confluence. It included starting to save up for the fish net we need to eventually pay for at Ridgeway to prevent escapement of smallmouth bass. It included some money for fishing tournaments at Ridgeway and Elkhead to try to get rid of some non-native fish there that were causing the recovery program some problems, and a few other things. And we are going back through that $1 million. The tournament money has been spent, but the rest of the money is still sitting there. And so CPW is working right now to prioritize some of those and figure out how much money we need to keep for those original projects and how much money they can take out of that 2015 Species Conservation Trust Fund money to help fund this year's ANS program. And that's my update, if there are any questions.
Any questions for Michelle? I don't think so.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
All right, we're going to have, are we good to go with 27? All right, we're back on 27.
Thank you, Chairman Wattenberg. I apologize for all the shuffling. I think we try hard to guess on how much time things take, and I think there's a little bit of a reward to be ahead of schedule, so I appreciate the shuffling things around. There are a few members attending that are here to talk about the loan program when those items come up, and I think we're in good shape to have them here when they're going to be heard soon. Now, with that said, if you need to take a break as scheduled, I think we could fit that into the next 3 items. So we've got this presentation on 27, talking about the money available and what the accounts look like right now, and then the next 2 items are new loans and change to existing loans. So there is some flexibility at this point to do what you need to do relative to a break. Okay. Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief. What I want to do, the handout should have been in front of you when you got back from lunch, and it's related to the construction fund and severance tax perpetual base fund. Again, those are the 2 accounts that we lend and spend out of. And this update to the board each time gives you an idea where we are relative to projections. We don't like to expect money out of severance tax until we see it in the account, although we do like to track it to see where we are relative to the flow of cash coming in, not only from severance tax, but also loans that are being repaid, and then our spending on our projections of the projects bill, which you heard yesterday. On the construction fund side, which should be the first page of the handout, I'm just going to highlight some items that I think might be of value for you to pay attention to, and things that I'm tracking and might look a little unique. Line number 3 is the large amount, that's $79 million under current. That includes the $70 million that came in from Aurora, the early repayment, and that's why that is such a large number. Normally that's around about $20 million estimate each year. In that same column, we're always following federal mineral lease on line number 5, cash in from FML. That is a number I've shared with you in past meetings that is way down. Typically, we've been, I say typical, over the last 5-6 years, we've been upwards of $16-17 million. Our projection right now is that that'll come in about $9 million. So it's considerably lower than usual, and part of our efforts with the projects bill is to help offset some of that significantly low projected revenue. And as you can see under current, we've already received about 4.1 million in, so we're on par to come in at about $8.5-9 million. I'll move all the way down to line 14, where there's only one more board meeting that we're going to have before the end of the fiscal year, and then we'll start this cycle over again. And so I look to Anna and find out what her records look like and potential loan candidates coming in, just to make sure we line up the money available as we finish out the year. And I've got included about 10 million, probably 10 to 13 million available in this account for new loans. She's indicated that there's a considerable amount of need in the next couple board meetings, between 10 and $20 million. So looking at this item, or this account plus the severance tax account, we should be in good shape with that to cover that at the end of the fiscal year here. The next item to pay attention to would be line 21, and that's the expectation of the projects bill to move forward, and the inclusion of the $90 million Northern Colorado, or Northern Windy Gap project loan. And you can see out of this fund, leaving a balance, projected balance of about $13 million. I've indicated that I typically need about 10 million, not only to cover operations of CWCB right at the first of the year, but also our automatic refreshes that are in the statute that we need to be able to fund. Let me flip to severance tax and then open it up to questions. So on the next page, a line to pay attention to, which is thing, and I will be digging deeper into why this is the case. But line number 4, the cash in from severance tax revenue. And I reached out to Bill Levine in Director Randall's office as to why the projection right now is showing $7 million for this fiscal year, but yeah, we've already received 10. And I'll get some more details on this, but I believe it is reflected from the fact that the General Assembly had to offset some of the refund requirements through Senate Bill 218 at the end of last year. And I think it's just the way that's coded in the system. I think we're going to see closer to 20 million in that, which is good news, obviously. But it just looks a little odd right now, and I'll get some more details for May's meeting. We're in good shape either way. And then looking down again at line 13, when I look at what's available for May, there's a couple $1 million in this account that we could utilize for new loans in May. We continue to track the restricted severance tax money, or this restriction in this account. Again, Senate Bill 218 restricted $19.1 million out of this account. That's on line 16. We continue to track that, and that's still holding true. There's I think a pretty good chance that part of that will be swept before, maybe even before we meet again. So I don't know if you wanted to expand on that at all. Okay.
So the governor's proposed budget, and I think I reported on this in January, but does propose transferring from severance tax to the general fund amounts that were restricted by Senate Bill 218 last year. That is being done to backfill severance tax refunds that have been borne by the general fund as a result of Senate Bill 218. So the general fund has repaid to severance taxpayers over $100 million over the last year or so in refunds. And again, those have been paid out of the general fund. They would have ordinarily been paid out of severance tax revenues as they came in the door. But because of 218, they were paid out of the general fund. And so what the governor's proposed budget does is backfill to the tune of about 75 cents on the dollar the refunds that have been paid out of the general fund. So that's the transfer. So I would urge us not to call it a sweep, because again, we're better off than we would have been without Senate Bill 218.
Thank you, and no disagreement here. I like to use the word swept because when it's in the account, it means my fingers are on it, and then you have to rip my fingers off to take it away. So yeah, I appreciate that that description. And as we move through this session, I'm sure that'll become clearer as to what will happen there. The last item, and then I'll open this up to questions. Lines 20 through 23 are a reminder of the $25 million that we have in the projects bill for water plan funding. We've used the term 10-5-10, and that's 2020. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a number missing in there. It'd be 20, 22, and 23 is the $25 million projects bill appropriation for water plan funding. And with that, again, and you look at the balance at the bottom, we're in good shape in both accounts. And I'll open it up to questions from here. There is no action required on this item.
Questions for Kirk? I don't think so, but I had one. Can we proceed with 28 and 29? Are these folks here, or do we need to have a break and let them arrive?
So 29, we're not quite ready yet, but 28, we've got two loans that we can get moving, and hopefully we will have our attendees here by.
Okay, let's go and go ahead with agenda item 28.
Derek Johnson, Finance Section staff, presenting item 28A. This is new loan to the North Pooter Irrigation Company for their Mountain Supply Reservoir number 10. The project site, as you can see it right here, is north or southwest of Wellington and north of Fort Collins. a little bit closer, this is what the site looks like amongst a bunch of other reservoirs and lakes as well. The North Poudre Irrigation Company has a footprint of about 300 square miles. They operate 22 storage reservoirs, 200 miles of ditches, and 5 flood control dams. You can see in the clouded area the range of their service area here. They have 570 shareholders as well. The project came about as they experienced a failure in the outlet pipe in 2016 August. And as a result, they were restricted back to about 80 acre feet, down from 300 or so acre feet. The elements of the project as they got into it involve areas, if you look at the, see, I can't get this there, the inlet ditch here for the upper 10 ditch, there's an inlet structure that needs to be replaced. There is about 500 feet of pipe that needs to be lined. At the outlet, there is some erosion that a new erosion control or dissipation structure needs to go in. And then from this point all the way across the reservoir here, there will be some grading to positively drain the reservoir. This was a potential dredging project, but it ended up being that they were able to get their full storage rights by increasing the outlet on this end too. So on this end, they're replacing the whole outlet structure, lining the pipe and putting a new gate and tower as well right here. So it ended up that it wasn't worth, it was more economical to go with raising the spillway than dredging the project. So that wasn't followed up on. The project total cost here is about $495,000. Here's just a couple views. The existing inlet structure at the ditch, the downstream end of the RCP inlet, you can kind of see the erosion in that area. And this is the existing intake structure through the dam right here, which will look quite differently by the end of the project. This company has a long history of loans with the CWCB. They currently have 8 loans in repayment. They have 2 that are, the construction is finished and they're pending closeout, and 1 ongoing project with the Livermore Tunnel that you all have seen in the last year or so. Over time, in anticipation of these projects, you could see how their assessments have gone up significantly, and more so in the most recent years here as well. We do show them as a average to strong borrower, and in fact, since the last time they were before the board, their numbers are a little bit better because they have done that jump from to 210 on their assessment as well. So with that, we have Tad Moen, the general manager, here in the audience, and Tara Scudder as well, if there are any questions.
Board members, questions for Derek? Tad, would you like to address the board? If you would like to.
Sir, I'd like to just thank you and the board for the opportunity.
If you could just identify yourself, if you would, please.
Tad Moen, General
Thanks.
Manager. I'd just like to take the time to thank the board and yourself for the time and the opportunity you have given North Poudre. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Director Yon.
I would move approval of staff recommendation on this loan.
Been moved. Second by Director Gallagher. Approve staff recommendation. Any further questions? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Agenda item 28B.
Good afternoon. Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff. Presenting agenda item 28B. This is the Wiggins Recharge Facility at Glassy Farms, and Town of Wiggins is the borrower. Wiggins is located just about 45 minutes east of here, and they are seeking a loan of about $2.4 million that includes a 1% service fee for a recharge project at the Glassy Farm. Paul Larino is the town administrator, and he is in the audience if you have any questions for him after my presentation.
Sorry, I didn't catch his name.
Paul Larino. The town of Wiggins was established in 1882. They were incorporated in 1974. It's a fairly small town. Approximately 900 is a population. Of that's about 330 homes. Total for the water and sewer is about 370 taps. They do have a water activity enterprise. This was established by town ordinance in 2010, and that is the entity that we are loaning through. You can see that they're located, get this working. Ooh, push too many buttons. All right, one button at a time. They're located where US 34 hits I-70 or 85, is what that should be. 76, thank you. The water supply for the town has historically been drilled wells into the Kiowa Bijou groundwater, and those are non-tributary, which is a good thing. However, they have seen declining water levels, yet high nitrate levels, and just overall poor water quality out of those wells. And so that forced the town to drill 2 South Platte wells. Those are much better quality. However, of course, alluvial aquifer wells require augmentation. They currently have an augmentation station off the Weldon Valley ditch, and they also lease augmentation water to make up for those depletions. The purpose of this project is to lessen the reliance on leased augmentation water, as this is the town's water supply. So they have identified the Glassy Farm, which is located just east of Fort Morgan. It's actually immediately east of Fort Morgan. And this farm and its water rights are for sale by the Glassy family. That family is the one that is original owners of this farm. They have since moved off of the farm. The buildings sit unused, and they currently lease it for some farming right now. But again, they have now put the farm and the water rights up for sale. Looking a little bit closer at the Glassy Farm, you can see its location to the South Platte River. This is in a pretty ideal location for a recharge pond for the town. And you can see again on the left where the Fort Morgan city limits are. So to get your bearings, we're just east of Fort Morgan. What they're looking at for this plan is 120 acres is what the farm is. They're looking at about 40 acres of that and 2 or 3 recharge ponds. Having multiple recharge ponds to allow for variable timing, some more short return flows, and the longer return flows. The land and the contours work very well for the recharge pond. They're able to, it was a flood irrigated farm, to make use of most of the ditches that are currently on the land, and they can use the Fort Morgan Reservoir Irrigation Company shares as they are delivered to the land currently. They are looking at how to share the use of this land and how to perhaps collaboratively work with other entities. So they're under the shared recharge, or 4 entities that they're starting to talk about to see if this site would work well for them also. Maybe enlarge the recharge ponds bigger than the town needs and be able to work with other water providers to provide recharge for them. They're also looking at a shared land use with the Morgan County Community College. Again, it's 120 acres, 40 acres will be recharge ponds. So they're working with the college to get a ag education program on the 80 acres. The college was interested in this land, and they were looking at buying this land for education purposes, ag education. However, that fell through. So now this is another way the college can, again, use this land for that. And I've highlighted in this picture below the Fort Morgan city limit sign. A positive of this is that there will still be some ag production on this land, even though the municipal is buying the land and the water rights. Being so close to Fort Morgan, it's possible that given a couple more years, that this would be just lumped into Fort Morgan's growth and become developed. So this does provide some open space opportunity. The project cost is about $2.4 million, as I've indicated. So this is covering the land and water rights purchase, the engineering and surveying required, construction of the recharge ponds, and the miscellaneous piping, head gates, and whatnot to fully get this augmentation or recharge pond going up. They're currently in the due diligence phase. They're under contract for the land and the water rights. The due diligence ends around June, July, and that's when they would close on the land and water rights for construction of late summer or fall of this year. I wanted to highlight some of the town growth plan because this is also what is causing them to look at additional water and again trying to get off of reliance of leased augmentation water. Wiggins does have they are projecting approximately 310 jobs coming within the next 5 years. They also have some single family development, multifamily development that is just started this year, or actually last year. So they are seeing that their water use, as any city, will be going up as they grow a little bit more. They do have water conservation ordinances in place. They are under the covered entity for what CWCB would have for a full-on water conservation plan approved by CWCB. However, again, they do have an ordinance that places some water conservation requirements. As these homes come into existence, they do have an investment fee of $11,500 per tap. That is to try to get the new development to pay their way more or less of getting more and more water and the infrastructure. So this project is not for the new growth, but the new growth hopefully will help overall with their plan because they do have other improvements needed to their water infrastructure, and they are also looking at future recharge ponds. So with or without the new developments, they do need this project. However, the new developments also highlight the need further for this project. Project financials. They are seeking a 30-year loan from us. They do qualify for the low income municipal rate, so that is 2.4%. The loan obligation for the first 10 years, again, that includes the 10% reserve requirement, is about $125,000. When you look at the ratios, they are an average borrower. However, you do see the ratios that look at the community-wide, so the debt per tap. They are fairly weak on that. And that, again, is just because they are a small community, so there's less to spread the debt around. The collateral for this loan will be the water activity enterprise revenues. And with that, I will ask the board if you have any questions of me or of Mr. Lorino.
Questions for Jonathan? Paul, would you like to address the board? Oh, I'm sorry, Director Clow.
It could be for either of these gentlemen, but I'm not understanding the connection between building houses and 300 jobs.
They are separate. So the town recently annexed 2 industrial properties then that's what's going to bring in the jobs. Also, the town has also annexed 2 residential properties or for residential development. So they aren't connected, but they are happening at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, continue.
Paul Lorino, Town Administrator for the Town of Wiggins. And thank you, board members. I appreciate you taking the time to review our application. I think Jonathan covered everything very well. As he mentioned, our original wells were a part of the Kiowa-Bijou Basin. We were actually under enforcement orders starting back in 2010 from the Colorado Department of Health because our nitrates were approaching double of what the EPA limits were. That caused us to go 7 miles north of the town limits to drill these South Platte wells. And now we're into the wonderful world of water court and augmentation and learning a lot as we go through that. I'm originally from Missouri, and you pay $55 and you put your well in the ground and you pump what you want. And so this has been a new experience as I've been working through this as a town administrator. But as we drill these wells, we do receive some water from the Weldon Valley ditch. Those shares limit our pumping to around 180 acre feet or so. And our town usage is floating anywhere between 160 to 200 acre feet a year, depending on what the weather conditions are. This year, it probably will exceed 200 if this moderate drought continues. So we are looking for ways to provide water to our citizens. We are an agricultural community. Our economic base is really the agricultural community. So we are acutely aware of, and as we see, the Front Range coming in and using land and doing that, we're acutely aware of the effects of growth has on agriculture. And this is why the town kind of liked this property. It's in the way of growth of Fort Morgan. It's a budding industrial park area in the Fort Morgan area. So it does, the farm would have been eaten up at some point, more than likely. Through the Fort Morgan, if you transfer the water to another property, I think there's a 50% automatic loss that's in their bylaws. So it really doesn't make it aggressive to move that water anywhere else. So it's really a good property. We're looking for relationships and collaborating. We've talked with Central. We're hoping to work something with the college when we do our change on the well. And I'm sorry, I am a fast talker. When we do our change on the wells, we're going to look to see if we're going to have our attorney look if we can have that used for municipal and agricultural use. And there are some years, like right now, we do have some leased water for the next few years from Castle Rock. And there are years that we can allow some farming activities going there when the season's wet and we can pump during wet river. We want to do that because we want to support our communities. Last thing I want to say, you mentioned we do have a conservation water plan in the town. We limit watering alternating days. We don't allow watering during the daytime. And we look for different policies that help improve our water quality and also our conservation. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Paul? Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Director Yon.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that this is one of the reasons that I really enjoy being part of this board is because you have small towns coming in, you have large towns coming in, you have agricultural producers, you have environmental issues, and it's so diverse, and that we're able to help all this is an incredible thing. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this board. But this loan coupled with March Madness has kind of brought back memories, and I just the Wiggins is the home of the Tigers, and they were one of our rivals with the Caliche High School. And so,
did we win or lose?
Yeah. In 1981 at Wiggins High School, we got beat on the last second shot by Wiggins Tigers, but it only sharpened us for the state tournament, and we ended up winning the state championship. So I'll go ahead and recommend this loan.
Been moved by Director Yon, second by Director McLeod to approve staff recommendation, agenda item 28B. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Let's move to agenda item 29.
That's right.
Thank you. Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff for the record. For agenda item 29A, this is a loan modification to the Big Elk Meadows regarding their emergency loan that they have with us currently. The project is the emergency raw water storage reconstruction project. Originally, this was a $1.5 million loan. They're seeking an increase up to $2 million. And the loan terms are changing also. They're at the end of the 3 year of no interest. They're seeking another 3 years of no interest, and then amortizing the final loan balance over 30 years. And we'll talk more about that as we go along. Paul Cyphers is the treasurer, and he is not yet here. However, Glenn Christensen is the vice president, and he's also head of the reconstruction team, and he is in the audience, and so he's available for any questions as well. Big Elk Meadows is located between Lyons and Estes Park. You can see here on the map, they have or had 5 water supply lakes. which we'll see more pictures of. The borrower is the Homeowners Association. They're a nonprofit corporation, and they cover 166 lots within the Big Elk community. There's also a water association, as they do their own water treatment and water distribution. So they work closely together, but they are separate legal entities. And this loan is to the Homeowners Association, not the Water Association. This graphic shows the 5 water supply dams that were in existence. From Meadows, a downstream dam, and Sunset is a very upstream dam. Big Elk Meadows first came to us in 2011, and they received a loan for the Meadows project. This is showing the final project here. It was redoing their outlet structure, and Google Earth captured the aerial of in construction pretty well for that construction project. Meadow is a critical component of the augmentation plan that allows for this water, for the community to have this water treatment. The quickest recap of the September 2013 flood, since we've all been recapped a lot, is it rained a lot, and it rained a lot exactly where this project is located. So the 2013 flood, the top left image is showing the 5 ponds before and after the flood came through. It wiped out every one of the 5 dams, and on the bottom right is Mirror Dam. That's showing the after. Mirror Dam also serves as the primary access into the community. The road goes across the dam top, or it did. So they lost all 5 dams in the flood. They lost a lot of sections of roads. The water supply lines were demolished, and electricity was down for a while. So this community, fairly isolated, but hit fairly hard during the flood. That brings us to January 2014, when the board approved the emergency request. They looked at the project in 5 phases, Mirror and Rainbow as the first phase. Again, Mirror Dam is located here. That is the primary access way into the community, and the intake for the water treatment plant is also off of Mirror Lake. Rainbow is the largest lake that is above the treatment plant, so they identified those as the first 2 critical pieces to get done. Meadow was their second critical. Again, that is required for the augmentation plan. Willow Dam, and then Sunset was the final phase. Again, the original loan request was $1.5 million. In the ask, they were estimating approximately $500,000, a little bit less than $500,000 is what they were hoping would be the final loan balance. Again, this was right after the floods. The FEMA question was still out there. Some other grants were still out there. So the loan was approved for $1.5 million to help them get started, hopefully down to $500,000 final loan balance. So now I'll walk you through the phases of where they're at, the progress they've made in the last 3 years. So again, Mirror Lake, this was a picture that you saw earlier. It's the primary access into the community. This is the before picture, the after picture, and then where it's located. And these 3 pictures will remain in that same order as we go along the phases. So Mirror Lake has been completed. The cost came in above what they were originally looking for. FEMA has approved in concept a 75% cost share on this dam, and the association plans on using their cash for the remaining 25%. But again, this dam is now completed and up and running. Rainbow Lake was also part of the first phase. Again, this is the before picture, or the after flood picture rather. And this was, again, the largest water storage upstream of the intake. That dam has also been completed. And again, FEMA has approved 75% cost reimbursement, and they'll make up the remaining using their cash. This photo here highlights the spillway that they included. All of these dams were re-looked at of what spillway is needed. It's now, am I moving that? Sorry, the mouse is moving up there. I'm not sure how. It went away. I think that's Heinz. So as they're designing these dams, they are designing them to current day standard, working with the state engineer's office. And again, Rainbow Lake has been completed. Meadow Lake, this was the dam that in 2011 they received approval to redo the outlet. They finished that outlet February 2013. They substantially completed the outlet, and then September 2013 they donated the outlet to Nebraska. These rails are the same rails here. And so Meadow Lake, again, it's absolutely critical for their water infrastructure because without it, they can't fully operate their augmentation plan. And FEMA had originally said, yes, this is a critical component. However, you've seen this image before. FEMA later came back and said, no, never mind. We do not consider this a critical component. And the main issue for FEMA is, understanding Colorado water law. They see, if I point out here, Meadow Lake is down here, the intake is upstream. So the molecule of water that's in here will not get into the water treatment plant. Therefore, FEMA says it's not a part of your water treatment plant. With augmentation, Colorado water law, it's absolutely critical that they have this in order to allow the water treatment plant to operate. So the state engineer's office has worked with this. We've worked with this. The state office of emergency management, they're in support of this, and they're all working for the appeal, for a successful appeal. It is now in DC. They filed this last appeal in March of 2016. FEMA has 90 days to respond. However, when you have the money, you don't have to hold yourself to that standard. And so a year later, they have not heard anything about the status of this appeal. So moving on. Willow Lake is the third, and pleased to report that they are currently in contracting. They issued the notice of award just this last March. We were at the pre-construction meeting a week or so ago. So Zach Dirt has been awarded this project. The construction should start either very end of April or May. It depends on the spring runoff, if they get snow up in the tributaries or not. So that'll depend on that, but they are looking for a completion of this in September of 2017. And then last and kind of least, because it is the smallest, so it was their lowest priority, is Sunset Lake. They're looking at finishing design, bidding for this this summer, hopefully a fall winter construction of this. And so Meadow Lake, if you take that one out of the picture, they're hoping to be done with those 4 dams by spring. Meadow will kind of depend on if they hear back from FEMA. Eventually, they do have to build the dam. And so when we looked at the finances for this, we assumed, the finance section assumed that FEMA is going to deny that. So how will they move forward? So table 1 in the memo shows the overall budget. It's broken down by the 5 different lakes. And I want to highlight again that this is a final expected budget. So when all is said and done, Mirror Lake should receive 75% funding from FEMA, as well as Rainbow Lake. If you look at those two, that's a total of $1.28 million that FEMA has said, yes, we will provide. To date, they have received approximately $600,000. And so they're having a cash flow issue because of the time it takes from doing the construction to getting reimbursement. And that primarily is the reason for the slow increase. As you can see on the overall budget, they are expecting to be done with everything and have $500,000 in debt. However, for cash flow, they're needing some more cash from us to help them carry through. And so that's the reason for increasing from $1.5 million to $2 million. And the association cash on the right hand, I do want to point out that they did assess every homeowner or lot owner a $5,000 special assessment in 2014. This was to be paid over 3 years. Of that, they have received over 99% of those funds. And so they were successful in raising approximately $830,000 so that they could use cash instead of relying on long-term debt. So this table, hopefully I can just explain it rather than get into every number here. But what I wanted to do here is show the history of their homeowners assessments. The big concern to us is I have a homeowners association. I don't really like my homeowners association. If they increase the association fees, I will get mad. And so how has the community responded to this? What has their assessments been? How successful have they been in raising the fees? And so you can see that before the flood, this fiscal year 2013 or fiscal year 12-13, their assessments were $1,350 per year. And that covered a debt service debt service made up $152 per year per household before the flood. The flood hit, they received some private party debt. These are homeowners within the association that were able to provide some quick cash. And they also deferred 3 years of payment of the original 2011 loan that was approved at the January 2014 meeting, that the board approved a 3-year deferment, no interest, let you get back on your feet a little bit and figure out a plan going forward. So after the flood, they increased the assessments to $1,470 and then again to $1,550, and that's where they're at right now, is $1,550 per lot. And of that $1,550, $303 goes to the debt service. You will see that when the emergency loan kicks in, if the board approves another 3-year deferment on the emergency loan, the no interest period, those annual payments would begin fiscal year 1920. At that time, their previous debt is off the books. And so if we assume the $500,000, which is the plan, that's the $26,000 debt service, and their overall debt service for the community will go down. However, if the worst case scenario, they end up taking the full $2 million and they leave the debt there at the $2 million, the overall debt service will go up quite significantly, and that would require a further increase to their assessments. But as is now, as they look in the future, they don't project needing to increase their assessments any higher than they are currently, and they are successful in getting those assessments as they are currently. So that brings us to the project financials. Overall, the project cost is $4.2 million approximately. This has increased since their first request to us. They were able to, I forgot to mention a few slides back, they did receive a community development block grant disaster recovery to help some of these costs. And so even though the project costs went up, the original loan request did not count on this almost $1 million being available to the association. So the chart on the right shows kind of their current projected funding when everything's complete. Our loan will end up paying for about 12% of the project. FEMA will cover about 44%. The community development block grant will cover 24%. And the HOA in cash will be covering the 20%. Of course, this is after reimbursements are made. We do project having to disperse the $2 million and then be repaid back within that no interest period. Financial ratios indicate an average borrower. The collateral remains the same as was originally approved. It's the assessment revenues, and we also did receive hard collateral in 160 acres within Big Elk Meadow. So the staff recommendation is as written. A kind of quick at a glance is original approval was 1.5 million. They are now seeking 2 million. That was 3 years at 0% and 27 years at 2.75. We are asking it to be changed to 6 years. Of course, 3 of those have already been used up, and then 30 years at 2.75%. The contract condition that's being changed, we discussed this with the board, I think over 2 years ago, was originally on all these emergency loan memos, we put in that grants had to be repaid back to us within 30 days. So once the association gets FEMA money, they need to pay us back right away. What we found out is that this doesn't work very well. So we decided to change it to 30 days after the project closeout. And the direction was to change these as we amend the loan contracts. For this loan, we haven't had to amend the loan contract until now, so this is when we will officially amend that contract condition. So I think that is, yes, that is all. It's a lot of information, but please feel free to ask any questions of me, or again, Glenn Christensen's in the audience too.
Any questions for Jonathan? Glenn, would you like to address the board?
Thank you very much.
If you could,
my name is Glenn Christensen. I'm on the board of directors and also in charge of the reconstruction projects going on in the Meadows. Thanks to your generosity and sincere financial assistance, we're moving forward in the Meadows on the 5 dams that need to be reconstructed. I was a resident and stayed after the flood throughout the period of no power, no water, no phone, the whole 9 yards. So I was tickled pink when the power came on because I had some warmth. We're going full steam ahead with the dams. As Jonathan mentioned, we've basically completed Mirror Dam, which was our main entranceway into the Meadows. We have successfully completed Rainbow, which was our second dam. And we're currently working on a contract to work with Zach Dirt so that we can start Willow Dam this probably the end of April, early May, and that's dependent on spring runoff. So we're really looking forward to get the dams back in place. Our biggest concern right now is Meadow Dam, because I actually am working with the state and have contacted the state regarding their lack of response or focus on our appeal. I just recently went out to the FEMA website, checked our status. The only status out there is when we filed the appeal back in March, and it's sitting there with blank entries. And in talking to the state liaison for FEMA, he basically says, good luck on getting any status, because with the change of administration in DC, you may wait up to a year. So it's probably not good news, but we're still moving forward with what we have to do. Any other questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Director Yon.
I would move staff recommendation.
Been moved. Second by Director Gallagher to approve staff recommendation, agenda item 29A. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I have a quick question for the board members. Would you like to continue on, or would you like a break? We're charging to the finish. Agenda item 31. Please go ahead, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Steve Biondo with Colorado Water Conservation Board staff. And this is agenda item number 31, Severance Tax Operational Fund Grant Program. Each year, we bring to the board a list of projects that we have received applications for that we would like the board to address as an en bloc item. So what we'll be doing here today is going through all of the recommended projects, and at the very end, we'll make a motion. As most of you are aware, the Severance Tax Trust Fund is split into 2 parts, and it is based on the depletion of minerals and oil and gas, and there's a tax on that. And I'm sure you've all heard today about, you know, the up and down movement of the Severance Tax Fund, and we might only get $7 million and all that kind of good stuff. There's a lot of things going on which we don't really have to address for this particular item. Normally what happens each year is, as you can see over here, we split the pie chart into 2 sections there. And on the very right-hand side, if I could figure out how to get the thing going. Oh, that didn't work. There we go. On the right-hand side, we have several percentages for the different agencies. So our operating fund is split into various groups. The CWCB gets 5%. And the whole agencies primarily get about $14 million each year. The DNR Executive Director's Office makes that determination, and they split it up, and they give us all approximately $14 million. With everything going on currently, CWCB is supposed to get $1.2 million, and we are still expecting to get that. Now, in your board notebook, there is a memo, and in the memo on pages 2 and 3, there is a list of what we call priorities, and we have high, medium, and low. The lows we are not presenting for recommendation. The others are high and medium, which if the board prefers, we can move those around in the event that we don't receive our 1.2 million. But as far as today, our information is that we will receive it all. So we have 30 applications, 25 of those have been recommended, 5 were not. Now we've grouped them into the different sections, plus our last section is higher education research. Now these are research projects that Dr. Reagan Wascom has gathered, discussed with staff, and then presented to us, and we've decided which ones we want to try to pursue and get your concurrence on. Staff is here to address any of these projects if you have questions on, if you haven't had a chance to look at them, or you have any comments or questions you'd like to make about them. And in your notebook, like I said, they have the high, medium, and low for these. This is the interstate, federal, and water information. They have 11 projects. As you can see, we have work related to recreational projects all the way through. And if there are any questions on those, I can take questions as we go along or just wait till the end. Your preference.
Any questions, directors? Seeing none, charge on.
Okay. These are also interstate, federal, and water information. There's another 6 here. Should be a total of 11. We have a couple of very large ones, like the aquatic nuisance species control. It's too bad we couldn't use those for cooking because we'd get our money back pretty quick. But unfortunately, they are a nuisance and they're not edible. So, but we do have a number of different projects here in the compacts area, if anybody has any questions.
No, go ahead.
There was only one for the finance section that was presented by the state engineer's office, dam safety inundation mapping. Any questions on that?
Go ahead.
Okay. Next is stream and lake protection. There's 3 projects. Linda Bassi also graciously agreed to take care of the agency intern support this year, as we've had a number of different changes, and she stepped up to the plate and agreed to take care of our interns. Any questions on stream and lake?
Go ahead.
Okay. Watershed and flood protection. We have another 3 here. Flood mitigation has gone up a little bit this year. Requesting 150,000. There's a lot of things going on. If anyone cares to have any more information about any of those projects.
Go ahead. You're kind of getting the general drift here.
All righty. Last for the CWC portion is the water supply planning group. And we have Colorado's water plan. Well, actually, they're both for water planning. Any questions on that?
Nope, we're good.
Okay. And now we step up to higher education. These, as I said, were presented by Reagan Wascom to our staff, and then the staff chose these to move forward with. These are research projects. They're not typical get your study out there and go do it, but they're more in the line of research. And hopefully one day they will get it together. Any questions on those?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, that's basically it. At this point, I'd like to ask for the board's concurrence to accept the staff's recommendation in the order that they are presented in your board memo from 1 to 25 to recommend and approve the listing of projects to go forward to in July 1st through June 30th of 2018.
Director McLeod.
I have a question, Steve. If the funding is not sufficient to meet all of these commitments, do you take off the mediums first and then fund the highs, or do you divide it among the whole list?
No, that's why we put them that way. We want to take off the mediums first. The lows we already threw out. Mediums will be next, and then the highs. And then what we will need to do, if let's say it's, sliced in half, which I doubt, but let's say it is, staff would go through and we would cut down those projects as well. And then we would present that to the board in a consent agenda item. Or the director's report, depending upon what the director would like.
Thank you.
Not seeing any further questions, I don't believe. I think we have staff recommendation out there. Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move that we approve the staff recommendation.
It's been moved to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by Director Yon. To approve staff recommendation, agenda item 31. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we're down to item number 32.
Good afternoon. Suzanne Sellers from the Interstate Federal and Information Section. I have the distinguished honor to be the last one on the agenda, so bear with me. Over the last year, we've mentioned to you that the Royal Gorge Field Office of the BLM is looking at a process to revise their resource management plan. And as part of that, they've issued a draft suitability report. And the suitability report looks at streams within the basin to determine whether these streams would be suitable for inclusion in wild and scenic, the National Wild and Scenic System. The staff got an opportunity to review a cooperator's draft back in December and January. And as part of your packet, we've attached a letter that we sent to the BLM with staff comments. And so I wanted to point those out to you just so you're aware of what kind of comments we made. One of the topics that we raised then is the fact that much of the land that the segments that are being proposed for suitability is actually private land. And so if you turn to a map that's in your packet, you can see that the segments that the BLM is proposing for suitability are segments 1 through 4 of the Arkansas, and that goes from Leadville to Canyon City. And then there's also a segment on 8 Mile Creek. And on the map, you can see those segments as highlighted with a green outline. And then following that map, if you turn to the table, those segments are listed. And under segment length, you can see that segments 1, for instance, only 22% of that is BLM land. And so that's something we raised in our original document, and then also that's a topic that we're going to have you provide direction on today. And then another item that we raised in our original staff letter is permitting concerns. And I don't know how much you've been following the Waters of the United States rule. I know that was a hot topic a while back. The EPA passed a new rule, and then that rule is now being challenged in the court system. But since that time, well, I guess simultaneously, the Trump administration has directed the EPA to revise that rule. So what that means is, as far as which rivers and streams and ditches and wetlands would be considered waters of the U.S., in my mind, is really up in the air. And so, and the reason that we care about that is if those areas need permits, such as a 404 permit, or they're going to be using federal monies, they'll need to go through the permitting process. And if any projects that require permits impact suitable segments or segments that have been included in the Wild and Scenic Act, then there could be permitting ramifications. And so in our letter, we raised those general concerns, and we did point out a few of the projects that were not included in the draft suitability report. But I would just add that there are several projects on the Arkansas Basin Implementation Plan. They have many projects that could be impacted by finding suitability if they were to come seek federal funding or permitting. And so that is one concern. And then I think another concern that's we've recognized for a long time at the board is the potential for Federal Reserve water rights. And I think we've talked about that many times. And then also staff pointed out some existing measures that are in place that would protect these values, and that the BLM should consider. And so overall, our comments were included in the revised draft. And what it really comes down to now is whether or not stakeholders would support suitability. And you would think that since the section that I'm in used to be called water supply protection, that I would recommend that the board just go ahead and recommend that the BLM find these segments as not suitable. But I gave this some hard thought, and one of the things that I thought about was some of the previous processes. And if you recall, back when the Grand Junction Field Office was looking at suitability on the Dolores, this board made comments to the BLM on that. And there are some segments that the stakeholder group didn't address. And so the board recommended that the BLM find 2 segments not suitable. And when the BLM came back, they found that the reach at the state line was not suitable. And so they honored the board's request in that case. But they did not honor the request of the board that asked that the SOM up reach be not suitable. And so what my thought process is that if the board goes ahead and recommends not suitable now, it's a little bit of a toss-up as far as how the BLM will react. But one thing I can say is in the situations where there's been stakeholder processes where the stakeholders have come to consensus, the BLM has honored those recommendations from the stakeholder groups every time. And so what we're recommending today is that the board remain neutral at this time on suitability, so that the Arkansas River stakeholders may decide whether or not they do want to hold a stakeholder process. And if they don't, the board can weigh in later. The one thing that I did raise in the recommendation, as I mentioned earlier, is there is a lot of the stream segments that are recommended that are adjacent to private land. And so what we're recommending is that the board gives staff the direction to submit a letter to the BLM on behalf of the board, where we remain neutral on suitability for the time being. However, we encourage the BLM to remove segments that are adjacent to public land. And I should add that I've been working with Linda Bassey on this this item, and so she's also available for comments.
Questions for Suzanne? Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is Director Hamill still on the line?
Yes, I am, Director McLeod.
Do you have any sense of how the stakeholders are reacting to this potential suitability finding for these segments?
Well, we did present to the roundtable. Suzanne set it up, which I appreciated very greatly, and showed the roundtable and had the BLM present the whole process plus what steps they were in. And so far, the water users, surprisingly to me, have been silent. And so I've asked staff if they would come back, which is delayed April 25th, I believe, held in conjunction with the Arkansas Basin Water Forum, and just give them an update, an overview, like Suzanne has done here, and let them know what the process is and you know, potential future impacts. So and also plan to make a couple of calls, particularly in the upper basin, to see if they're following this process. But it's a good question, Director McLeod.
Suzanne, please.
Linda and I have also followed up with some stakeholder members, and we've heard from some of the water users that they may be experiencing a little bit of stakeholder fatigue, I think. And so, which I can understand, being an engineer. So I think they decided when I talked to them that they wanted to wait and see. But the recreational stakeholders indicated they are interested, and I believe Linda also may have talked to some folks. I guess I would just encourage the stakeholders to really consider doing a stakeholder process, because I think it's been the most successful way of finding something that works for everyone in the basin. And I would just bring up another example in the on the Dolores River again. The Tres Rios Field Office came out with their draft and then final RMP, and there were several water users that objected to the finding of suitability in that one. And right now, suitability still stands there. And at the time, the CWCB requested that the BLM include a reopener, so that if the stakeholders did come to consensus, they could reopen it. And the BLM chose not to do that. So I think so far, history shows the most successful route has been through the stakeholder process, even though there's a little bit of fatigue that's happened.
Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we have historically been concerned about water rights issues when it comes to wild and scenic river designations, and I think we should continue to be concerned about that, but I'm reluctant to do anything but be neutral, as you suggested, until we get a better feel for how the local stakeholders are approaching this. I can't imagine anyone having private land next to a suitable segment of the river would be pleased, And I don't know what BLM gains by doing that. So I don't know enough of the details of this area to understand that, but I think your neutral suggestion is probably a good idea for the time being.
Well, to be honest, we're recommending overall neutrality with the exception of the private land piece, where we recommend that the board recommend to the BLM to modify their findings. And it's something that happened on both the San Miguel process as well as the Grand Junction process. The BLM modified their segments to not include any private lands unless landowners bought off on that.
Linda, do you have some comments on this?
I think Suzanne covered it. I just wanted to add, Linda Bassey with the Stream and Lake Protection Section. Just wanted to add that in our letter on the cooperating agency draft, we encouraged the BLM to work through the in-stream flow program if they felt they needed additional flow protection on these reaches. So, and we'll continue to reach out to the stakeholders and see what they want to do.
Any other questions? Director Hamill, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Unfortunately, I couldn't quite hear all Director McLeod's comments, and I'm sure they were meaningful. I may have to get on the phone with him sometime and understand his wisdom. So I wish I could have heard all the comments.
Go ahead, Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Suzanne, I don't see the language you're talking about in the letter where you recommend that it not be found suitable and for private land segments. Is that what you're saying?
At the second page of the memo on page 2, the staff recommendation, we first recommend that the board direct the CWCB director to prepare a memo and comment on behalf of the board. And then we state that the letter remain neutral on the subject of suitability until a stakeholder group can decide whether or not they want to convene. And then the last sentence is that we request that the BLM consider modifying any segments to exclude private reaches unless.
Okay, I was looking at the January 4th letter.
Sorry about that.
That's a different letter. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Further question? Go ahead, Director Hamill.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and move staff's recommendation on this item.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. Second by Director McLeod, moved by Director Hamill for approval of staff recommendation, agenda item 32. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Suzanne. Director Eklund, do we have anything else on the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well done, I might say, for your first meeting. Well, very good. I did want to introduce, I mentioned her yesterday. Brenna, are you still here? Yeah, there she is. Hey, Brenna, see you wave at everybody. Brenna Mefford, welcome. I mentioned that you were coming aboard, daughter of a hydrologic engineer, born and raised in Lakewood with spending summers in a family ranch in South Park, and CSU, majored in civil engineering, played lacrosse while she was there, so I might bend her ear on how to help coach my son who's just picking that sport up. Master's in water resource engineering, went on to the Wyoming State Engineer's Office where we stole her away. And she and her new husband, they just were married in September, Jason, I think his name is, are excited for this new chapter. So please welcome her. And I know she's going to be a great addition to the staff. And then only other thing I've got, Mr. Chairman, is I saw Don Ament was here yesterday. He was at Ag Day down at the Capitol, so missed being able to I'll just repeat what I said yesterday about the Diane Hoppy Scholarship Program. We're very much, we're at the very final stages of getting that wrapped up and established for this board to go ahead and implement. So looking forward to working with Commissioner Ament and crossing the finish line with that program. So a lot of good comments that I heard from the rest of the board after that item was mentioned yesterday, Commissioner. So thank you for your help with that, and we'll work with her sons to get that across the finish line. So that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Director Eklund. Is there a motion that we adjourn? Director Randall.
So if I might, during my director's report yesterday, and I was talking about some of the changes at the department, I mentioned a few that were going on, but I also didn't want to steal Director Eklund's thunder because he hadn't yet publicly announced, at least on the microphone, that he was leaving. So I want to take the opportunity now, James, to thank you for your service to the department, to the board, to your great success with the water plan. And I truly wish you nothing but the best in your next endeavors. So just thank you. I understand tomorrow's your last day in the office. So have fun next week on spring break, and good luck the next week when you start your new job.
Thank you so much.
Yep, of course.
I think those sentiments are echoed by everyone. So very good. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Motion by Director McLeod, second by Director Gallagher. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
We're officially adjourned.